In 1992, the Miami Zoo was forced to put 30 of its flamingos inside of a bathroom during the Category 5 Hurricane Andrew. This was an extremely stressful procedure for the birds, but it was a last resort to save them from the devastating effects that killed dozens of animals at the zoo. This photo shows nurses standing with mental asylum patients wrapped in wet linens during the early 1900s. This treatment was thought to be calming for the patients, despite many of them constantly screaming to get out. On a British Airways flight in 1995, a woman was complaining of chest pain, so 2 doctors came over to check on her. They quickly realized she was suffering from a punctured lung and required immediate surgery. But the problem was they couldn't land for help since the increase in air pressure could kill her. So they decided to perform mid-air surgery on her using a coat hanger, silverware, and a bottle of cognac for sterilization. Within 10 minutes, they miraculously saved her life. Paul McCartney decided not to tell his wife Linda that her cancer had progressed and become terminal. He didn't think it would do her any good if she knew, so she continued riding her horse until the day before she died. Real bees were used during the filming of the 90s horror trilogy Candyman. Over the course of 3 movies, actor Tony Todd was stung 27 times and was paid $1,000 per sting. A restaurant in Bangkok has been continuously cooking and serving from the same pot of soup for over 45 years. Known as perpetual stew, new ingredients are added every day to continuously evolve the flavor over time. As a result of its burning sulfur, the Indonesian volcano of Kawah Ijen is the only volcano in the world with blue lava. Sunken World War II ships at the bottom of the ocean are actually extremely valuable. They're the only sources of steel in the world that remain uncontaminated by nuclear radiation. This extremely rare golden possum found in Australia was named Pikachu for obvious reasons. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile is said to be the oldest and driest desert in the world. But every 5 years or so, the arid landscape explodes with plant life during a rare phenomenon known as desert bloom. Recognize any of the objects in this photo? This picture is designed to give the viewer the simulated experience of having a stroke, particularly in the occipital lobe of the cerebral cortex where visual perception occurs. Everything looks hauntingly familiar, but you can't quite recognize a single object. Here's another photo that serves the same purpose. In 2017, a man was digging beneath his property in Arkansas to install some power cables. That's when he happened to stumble upon this massive 3,000-pound quartz cluster that later sold for over $500K. A man from Washington State found a caterpillar that looks like it has the face of Edgar Allan Poe on its back. Formed over 100,000 years ago, Naka Cave is a popular tourist attraction in Thailand since it closely resembles a giant petrified snake. Dutch cyclist Martin de Jong was scheduled to fly on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, the one that went missing in 2014. But he decided to take a different flight that departed 1 hour earlier. Just 4 months later, he was supposed to fly on Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, which was shot down over Ukraine. But he changed to a different flight yet again because he found a cheaper deal. A man from New Jersey bought a $5 bottle of orange juice from ShopRite, but his wife made him return it because she thought it was too expensive. He then decided to buy 2 Powerball tickets with the refunded money and ended up winning the $300 million jackpot. This person caught the same exact fish within a 2-month span. One of the most renowned vasectomy doctors in Austin, Texas is named Dr. Dick Chop. These 2 nurses were hired within months of each other to work the same shift at the same Florida hospital. They soon discovered that they were long-lost sisters from Korea who had been separated for nearly 40 years. Someone found this shell at the beach with barnacles on it that make it look like an anatomically correct heart. In 2019, an Australian man was walking his dog named Lucky when he accidentally kicked something hard that he thought was dog poop. But upon picking it up, he quickly realized it was actually a gold nugget worth right around $35,000. Someone took a pic of an albino peacock at the exact time that it flew over a regular one, making it look like its spirit was exiting its body. The original patent for the fire hydrant was destroyed in a fire when the U.S. Patent Office burned to the ground in 1836. Thus, the true inventor of the fire hydrant remains a mystery. Packers fan Jim Becker regularly donated blood in order to afford tickets for games. Years later, he found out that he had a potentially deadly disease that could only be prevented through bloodletting. So without even knowing it, he was saving his own life by donating blood the entire time. In the 1980s, actor Steve Buscemi was a New York City firefighter for 5 years. So when 9/11 happened, he showed up at his old firehouse to volunteer. For an entire week, he worked 12-hour shifts every day to dig through the rubble and help find people. When his mom told him about the attacks, ex-Marine Jason Thomas grabbed his Marine uniform and sped down to Ground Zero immediately. With the help of another Marine, he managed to save 2 policemen who were stuck in the rubble. A guide dog named Roselle led a group of people, including her blind owner, down 78 flights of stairs before the North Tower collapsed. She stopped once, only to give kisses to a woman who was having a panic attack. Vietnam War veteran Rick Rescorla saved all but 9 of his 2,700 employees during the attacks by directing people down the stairs using a blowhorn and encouraging them by singing Cornish songs. He was last seen running up the stairs of the South Tower to rescue more people just minutes before the building collapsed. The only off-duty NYPD officer who was killed in 9/11 had just signed his retirement papers that morning. But instead of leaving his badge, John William Perry decided to pick it up one last time. Michael Jackson had a meeting scheduled at the top of one of the Twin Towers on the morning of 9/11. But the night before, he was up until 3 a.m. chatting on the phone with his mom, and he ended up sleeping through the appointment. On that same morning, President George Bush's cousin Jim Pierce had a meeting scheduled on the 105th floor of the South Tower. But his group was apparently too large, so they rescheduled the meeting across the street last minute. In an episode of Johnny Bravo, there's a poster showing a building on fire with the words "Coming Soon." The episode aired in April of 2001, just 5 months before 9/11. In January of 2001, the World Trade Center's lease was sold to Larry Silverstein. Larry then took out an insurance policy that happened to include terrorism in its coverage. After 9/11, he took the insurance company to court and claimed that he should be paid double because there were 2 attacks. He won and was awarded $4.5 billion. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. But Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Released in the summer of 2000, the video game Deus Ex didn't include the World Trade Center in its skyline due to technical limitations. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed by a terrorist attack. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. And most disturbingly, the album was released on September 11, 2001. Before 9/11, FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill urged the federal government to take the threat of Al-Qaeda more seriously. But he was eventually pushed into early retirement due to disagreements with the FBI. He went on to become the head of security at the World Trade Center, where he was killed on 9/11. John Cena holds the Make-A-Wish Foundation record for the most wishes granted at 650. No other celebrity has even granted more than 300. When Volvo invented the 3-point seatbelt in 1959, they easily could have patented the design and made billions in profit. But they made it free for all competitors and likely saved millions of lives instead. Peo the French Stallion is a 16-year-old therapy horse who provides comfort to patients suffering from terminal cancer. Each day, he chooses which patients he wants to visit by kicking his hooves outside their door. During the American Civil War in 1862, a group of wounded soldiers in the mud were saved by a mysterious glow that appeared on their wounds. Flash forward to 2001, when 2 teenagers won an international science fair by discovering that their bodies were so cold that it created the perfect conditions for a form of bioluminescent bacteria. This phenomenon, called angel's glow, ultimately destroyed the bad bacteria that would have killed them and allowed their wounds to heal instead. 6'7" Danish explorer Peter Freuchen was the real-life version of the most interesting man in the world. Throughout the 1910s, he rode thousands of miles across the Arctic by dog sled. On one occasion, he became trapped in an avalanche and was buried deep in a pile of snow and ice. Lacking any sharp weapon to escape, he created a dagger out of his frozen feces and broke through the ice with his bare hands. Chandler Cruz was born with a form of dwarfism that resulted in her being only 3'6" by the time she was a grown adult. But thanks to advancements in biotechnology, she underwent a surgery that allowed her to grow 2 extra feet and extended her arms by 4 inches. Anthropologist Grover Krantz agreed to donate his body to science on the condition that he was kept close with his dog. The Smithsonian Museum honored his wish. After TV star Jack Benny died in 1974, his wife Mary received a red rose in the mail. After several days of receiving a new rose every day, she decided to call to find out who was sending them. The florist told her that Jack had arranged for a new rose to be sent to her every day until she died. In 2006, 2 Australian miners who were trapped in a cave requested an iPod containing songs by the Foo Fighters. Upon hearing this, lead singer Dave Grohl wrote a note to them saying, "I want you to know that when you come home, there's 2 tickets to any Foo show anywhere and 2 cold beers waiting for you." One day in 1989, about 2 million people from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania formed a human chain that stretched over 420 miles. They wanted to show their collective desire to escape the Soviet Union and the poverty and suffering that came with communism. A Syrian man with Down syndrome named Jad Isa not only had a child with his wife, but also raised him to become a doctor. In 2019, a Florida man accidentally locked his 1-year-old baby in his hot SUV. That's when 5 nearby prisoners out on work detail came to the rescue with a coat hanger to help break her out. The mother who recorded a video of it said, "Them prisoners bust that shit right open. Thank God for the criminals in the world." In the years that followed, he was the star of an Oscar-winning movie, wrote 32 books as an author, and became the 5th person to win the jackpot on the famous game show The $64,000 Question. In his later years, he became actively involved in the Danish resistance and fought against Nazi occupation of Denmark. He was seen as such a threat to the Nazi movement that Hitler himself ordered for Peter to be arrested and sentenced to death. The photo above shows Peter standing next to his 3rd wife, wearing a coat made out of the polar bear that was unlucky enough to cross his path. Yasuke was a former African slave who arrived in Japan in the year 1579. His black skin caused such a sensation that a powerful warlord requested to meet him. They developed a friendship, and Yasuke eventually became the first and only black samurai. 39-year-old Johnny Kim has been a Navy SEAL, a trained Harvard doctor, and was selected to become the first Korean American to go to space. Many people refer to him as the real-life Johnny Sins. In 1971, 17-year-old Julianne Kopko was sucked out of an airplane after it was struck by lightning. She fell 2 miles to the ground, still strapped to her seat, but somehow managed to survive. She spent the next 11 days alone in the Amazon jungle before being rescued by a logging team. During World War II, American Private Thomas Baker was gravely wounded by the Japanese but refused to give up the fight. He told his squad to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol containing 8 bullets. He was later found dead with an empty pistol and the bodies of 8 Japanese soldiers scattered around him.